Hi, thank you all so much for joining us tonight for our Historic Neighborhoods of Indianapolis series program. I'm Liz Ellis, the Executive Director here at the Indianapolis Propoleum. If you have questions for Jeremy, you're going to want to type those in the chat feature down at the bottom, and we'll get to those at the end of the program. The Propoleum was founded in 1888 by renowned suffragist and activist May Wright Sewell as a place where women and women's groups could meet and share ideas. We carry on that tradition today through our mission as the place that connects and celebrates women. Our mission focus is women's leadership, arts and culture, and historic preservation. As a nonprofit, we count on your support to provide engaging programming like tonight. Please take a look at our website, www.thepropoleum.org, for all of our upcoming events. And we hope that you can join us at our holiday open house coming up on the 8th. Tonight, our program will be presented by Jeremy Kranowitz. He is the head of the largest affiliate of Keep Indianapolis Beautiful, or Keep America Beautiful, which is Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. He has over 25 years of experience as a passionate and sustainability environmental nonprofit executive, launching multi-stakeholder coalitions to address climate change, food loss, food waste, clean air, clean water, and sustainable forestry. He presently leads efforts on a new strategic plan to create a more environmentally equitable Indianapolis. Jeremy lives in Heron Morton and has attempted, oh my goodness, I think I cut that right off. Something, Jeremy. What did you attempt? I'm so sorry. You attempted to go to all the neighborhoods. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Kranowitz.
Thanks, Liz. I appreciate it. Nice to see everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm delighted to have a chance to share this little presentation with you. I'm going to open up a brief slide deck, and we'll step through a number of different slides with a number of different stories. But I want to preface it by just saying a little bit about Keep Indianapolis Beautiful and the work that we do, and then we'll be open for questions and comments, and certainly would love to engage with you afterwards. But I'm going to see if I can share my screen. What did I just do with my PowerPoint presentation? Hold on one second. Of course, it worked right as we were preparing, and now, oh, I found it.
I think it's with the last sentence of my introduction. I think that's.
Okay. So can folks see that okay? Great. So again, I'm Jeremy Kranowitz. I'm the president and CEO at Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. For those who don't know, KIB actually started in the 70s with Mayor Hudnut, who was worried about the issues of litter in the city and started a public service announcement where he developed something called the Hudnut Hook, where he had pictures of himself doing hook shots of putting litter in its place, and created a commission within city government. It was a Clean Cities Commission or committee. And then soon thereafter, it actually spun off from city government and became an independent nonprofit organization in 1981. And for the past 45 plus years, this organization has been working in Indianapolis to do three main things. Our vision is to create a beautiful Indianapolis that, that is well cared for and ecologically rich. We engage diverse communities to create vibrant public places to help people and nature thrive. Here's Mayor Joe with a number of our students. We do youth programming throughout the summer. But as we think about this mission broadly, it is important that we are creating new green spaces where there haven't been any before, that we are restoring and maintaining our tree canopy and our urban forest, because it is important for all kinds of reasons that we have a healthy tree canopy in the city. And the third thing, the thing that we started with and that has been true with us for all these years, is that we spend a lot of time cleaning up our streets and our streams of litter. There are about 152 pieces of litter on the ground for every man, woman, and child in the city. So it is part of our ongoing mission to try to make Indy a cleaner and greener place. So I don't know how many Seinfeld fans are watching, but there was an episode where the Kramer, who's one of the main characters, is dating a woman on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He, of course, and Seinfeld and all of their friends have been living their whole time in the Upper West Side. And even though all the streets are numbered and labeled in New York, he gets horribly lost and can't find his way home. And it struck me that this is one of my favorite scenes, and it struck me as true that there are people who are born and raised on the north side of pick your city and never go to the south side, people who are born and raised on the east side and never go to the west. And it's not just in Indy, but it's in every city. And I've lived in a number of different places around the country. My wife and I are born and raised in Washington, DC. We've lived in the New York and Connecticut region for past 8 years, and then it's really over the last 2 that we've been living in Indy. And so I had this bolt of inspiration, which was, before I find a permanent place to live in Indianapolis, if I'm going to be the CEO of Keep Indianapolis Beautiful, I want to know all of the neighborhoods. And so for 15 weeks, I stayed in an Airbnb in a different neighborhood every week. So for 15 weeks, I stayed in 15 different neighborhoods. And my goal was to really get to understand that neighborhood, to find really good places to eat because I'm a foodie. And then really to see what kind of a difference Keep Indianapolis Beautiful was making in that particular neighborhood. And so this is going to be kind of my my travel log as I went through the city over that period. So my first week, I was down in Fletcher Place, and Fletcher Place is near KIB's headquarters. We're off of Fletcher Avenue, across the street from Dairy Queen, if Dairy Queen is a centering place for you and you know where that is. And it was remarkable to see not only all of the old homes, but also the new ones that were cropping up in between, and to look at that juxtaposition of different architectural styles. And not to pass judgment one way or the other, I just found it fascinating that there was sort of old and new all jostled up next to each other. Something else that folks may walk by all the time without knowing it are little pocket parks. So this is a little pocket park. It's off of Virginia. It is one that we created and maintain. And it's these little tiny pockets of joy that we sprinkled around the city. We actually have, over the years, built over 100 of them, and we're currently maintaining about 65 of them in partnership with local neighborhoods and community groups. So you may pass by a place like this with a little sign in it. It's not overly, it doesn't draw too much attention, but KIB is part of making these little parks a reality throughout the city. My next stop on my tour was over by Speedway. And it was interesting to me to discover Ben Davis Park. And I also am just really interested in understanding some of that history, understanding that Ben Davis was actually a railroad superintendent and oversaw the creation of a rail station over in Westwood that subsequently was renamed Ben Davis. And there also was a post office that was named Ben Davis, and of course, Ben Davis High School. And I just found that that little part of the city fascinating. Of course, it was next to Speedway, where I saw people with shirts on that said, "This is a drinking town with a this is a drinking town with a racing problem." And I was like, okay, well, at least you have a good sense of who you are and what you're about. and really though had fun on Main Street. There's this the famous soda and candy company that, if folks aren't familiar with, is just a delight. It has all kinds of candies and sweets going back decades. So I don't know where they're finding some of these older candies, but interesting things and sodas from around the world, and just found the whole that whole part of the city to be fascinating. My next stop was in Hawville, and I want to tell two stories about Hawville. One is that my Airbnb host that week, worked in the public library in the rare books department. And I was telling him my story about coming to Indianapolis, and how most folks that I was meeting coming from the East Coast were incredibly welcoming and delighted to see me and happy that I had moved out here. And some were like, it's strange that we didn't find somebody locally to be the CEO of KIB. And he shared with me a story about Mr. Evans, who was the first librarian ever in Indianapolis, who came here from Boston in the 1800s. And most people were really welcoming. And there were a few who said, why couldn't we find our own librarian? But he, the original library in Indy was on Monument Circle. And he was very strict. He worked 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. And he is the one who felt that libraries should be places for quiet contemplation and study. And he was the one who invented shushing. So we have librarians who shush us. We have Mr. Evans to thank for that, who was Indianapolis's first librarian. I thought that was a fun little fact to carry with us. And then I wanted to find out who Hawville was named after, and it was named after a man named Benjamin Haw, who had an iron foundry in Hawville on the west side. And this was skilled labor. He was doing shaped ironworks for buildings and railings, and these were, this wasn't just sheets of iron. This was designed iron for fancy homes and so forth, and could not find enough skilled ironworkers, and so went to Slovenia to recruit ironworkers and convince them to move to Indianapolis to work in his iron foundry. And so the reason why there is a Slovenian population on the west side of Indianapolis is because of Benjamin Haw. So I just wanted to share that little fun fact. We have another, this is another view. You invited a tree and environmentalist guy to your evening. So a lot of my pictures are going to be of trees, but this is another park. It is off of Michigan. And again, you can see sometimes there are items that may serve an industrial purpose that we have put murals on, but you can see that we've got some, these are railroad tracks, but we've also put in some designed plants and landscaping. I took these pictures live as I was traveling around them. So at different times of the year, they weren't always as lush and vibrant as they could be, but often there are items of interest throughout the year. Moving along, the next stop that where I stayed was on the Near East Side. And what I loved about this trip was that I stayed in a house that was over 100 years old. And everywhere I looked, there was chestnut. Floors, cabinets, the archways between the rooms. And it was just a story of chestnuts that had fallen because of blight and had been rescued and turned into homes and into, just wonderful, amazing, long-lived homes. And I just loved that idea of thinking about this wood that is so hard to find now, but that had been overabundant just because of disease. At Keep Indianapolis Beautiful, we do plant almost entirely native trees. but I'm excited that this year we're also planting elms. We have found a hybrid of elms that are resistant to Dutch elm disease. And so it was really lovely that that I moved here from Connecticut, and New Haven used to be called Elm City because there were so many elms once upon a time. And then most of them died because of Dutch elm disease. But to be able to plant an elm tree with my daughter in Indy was a real delight this past spring. The next stop where I on my trip was to Martindale Brightwood, and we've got a number of different pocket parks that I mentioned earlier. Something else, just so you'll notice now as you walk and drive around the city, we have planted over the years over 50,000 trees around the city. And we plant about another 3,000 or 4,000 every year. Every time you see one of these white tree guards at the base of a tree, that's one of ours. I should be doing a better job of branding it, putting a logo on it or something, but these are KIB trees. And the reason we put those guards there is to protect them from weed whackers and from potentially pests that might gnaw at the base of the tree. But it's really to protect them and ensure that they survive in their early years. I have to say that as I mentioned earlier, it was always important to me to find a really good place to eat, and can't pass up saying that eating at Festiva in Martindale Brightwood was really a joy, and I'm glad that one of my board members suggested it to me. So my next stop was on the near south side, and I was really interested in staying there because of its proximity to Garfield Park, which is it's the oldest park in Indianapolis. It's fascinating to see the older homes there that just border right on the park. I kind of wish that I could live in one of those grand estates that has the park out the window. But it is a really large park, as well as being one of the older ones. And we did something last year that that I'm still kind of buzzing about, which is, in every major faith tradition, there is something either in their sacred text or in their religious practice about caring for the world around us. So I was able to invite 10 different faith leaders to Garfield Park as part of the city's bicentennial. Each of them read a prayer about the environment or caring for the world around us, or about trees specifically. And then I paired them up and we planted trees together. And I didn't do any sort of forethought of saying, will there be problems if I pair up a Buddhist and a Baptist, or a Methodist and a pagan? And I didn't think through if there'd be any political fallout from that. But and luckily, of course, there wasn't any, because everybody was joining hands and doing this work together. And these trees that we planted will live and thrive for decades. And it was just, it was remarkable. And I'm really excited about opportunities for us to do more with faith communities around the city. I spent a week up in Broad Ripple, and what was fun about that for me was that I was able to stay in a converted carriage house. So it was small, it was cozy, it was admittedly a little drafty, but I loved the fact that there was just sort of this tight little cozy place that perhaps at one point had held wagons or horses or who knows what, but it was an older house that with a carriage house behind it, and just loved that opportunity to stay there. And then I just wanted to point out that this is some of my staff planting a tree right up in Broad Ripple, but you know, we actually do need a little bit of land on either side, but we can put trees in pretty tight spaces in urban settings. Urban trees have a tough time. They need a lot of care to thrive and survive. It takes trees early in their life. They need about 15 gallons of water a week, and if it doesn't rain, we bring that water to them. But we can actually have thriving trees in some of these tight spaces that the roots find their way down. They don't disrupt the water lines or the sidewalks. I think when you do see that with some of the older trees, those were not planned together. And so we're very careful about how we plan and where we plant our trees. I spent a week in Irvington and didn't know when I first came here in 2019 about Irvington and Halloween, but I happened to stay in Irvington over Halloween and really loved learning about how it was named after Washington Irving, who of course wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I don't know if that's why Irvington has such an amazing Halloween celebration, but it seems appropriate. And my wife and I, when we were living in the DC area, we lived in a town called Takoma Park, which is right outside of Washington, DC, and has a very similar feel to Irvington, with a lot of Takoma Park in Maryland has Sears Craftsman bungalows, and it had next to other oddly shaped and put together homes, and it was not lovely to be in Irvington and have that reminder of the place where we used to live, and also just the chance to walk around Ellenberger Park, which is fabulous. So my next visit was over to Pike Township. And again, as with Hawville, I wanted to find out why Pike Township was named Pike. So it turns out it was named after General Zebulon Pike, who was a general in the War of 1812. And he also has a mountain in Colorado named after him. So Pikes Peak and Pike Township are named after the same person. But I found Pike also interesting just because it seemed like you had industrial and commercial and residential all sort of smashed together, and that there wasn't a lot that separated one from the next, at least in the neighborhood where I was staying. And just found that to be, again, sort of accidents of history. I'm not sure exactly why that was, but found it really interesting. And then the greatest joy of all, of course, was discovering all of the restaurants that are over there in the International Marketplace, including the Saraga International Market, which has food from all over the world. And I know that they are currently closed for a couple months, but I can't wait to get back there and explore all the amazing things in the aisles there. I spent a week up in Eagle Creek. I used to row competitively when I was in college, so it was great to visit that rowing center and eat by the water. This is the shell here on my slide is a shell that I found on my walk, which just loved the look and shape of it. And anyway, it was great for me to just explore and be next to water, because we don't always get chances, even though we've got the White River running through the city, to really see the water as much as we could or should. So I spent the next week in Southport, home, of course, to Long's Donuts. That's the I don't know if there's historic beauty there, but there's beauty within at Long's Donuts and with the food there. But I wanted to share that I wanted to find out why Southport was named Southport. So I moved here from Connecticut. The next town over from where we lived was named Southport. It's in the southern part of Connecticut. It actually has a port. So being called Southport in Connecticut made a ton of sense. Southport, Indianapolis did not make a lot of sense to me. But I did a little bit of research, and it seems like the best explanation is that it was a layover for covered wagons that were called prairie schooners on their way west. And so in that way, it was a port for these covered wagons on their way west. And I as far as I can tell, that's the best explanation for how Southport got its name, but it's certainly not because of ships going out from one of the original colonies to supply the other ones. I spent a week up in Geist. I think I just started to miss the water a lot, and so went up to Geist and again really sort of explored not only the water but all of the trees that are up there, and this idea of forest bathing. If folks haven't heard that term, it's just this idea of how calm and peaceful you feel, how your heart rate and blood pressure actually go down when you are surrounded by trees. And there's scientific research about this, and something about it is just lovely and calming, and it was one of the best parts about being up in Geist. I next went to Beech Grove. Beech Grove is named, of course, because there used to be a lot of beech trees there, not so much today. But in Beech Grove is one of the best and biggest green spaces that we've ever created. It's at the Benedict Inn Peace and Nature Center. There are a number of Benedictine nuns who live and work there. And they also help and maintain this green space. It's several acres. It has walking paths. It has some art that has been installed. It's really just an amazing place to explore nature right in the middle of a neighborhood. And it's open, all of these are open to the public, and lovely down there by Beech Grove. And of course, there's also Sarah Bolton Park, where KIB is doing some work this year. I also spent time in Crown Hill. One of the interesting things about Crown Hill and neighborhoods like this is that there is this Great Places initiative. They're actually needing to change their name since we've passed 2020. I think, I don't know what the new name will be, but thinking about renaming some of these neighborhoods or parts of them to really give them a new sense of vibrancy, to understand and respect the history of those neighborhoods, but also to figure out new ways to make them accessible, clean places to live, work, and play, with lots of new economic growth and activity. And to the extent that we at KIB can be part of making those neighborhoods cleaner and greener and helping that neighborhood become more vibrant, that's the type of collaboration that we really love. And so I end up at Heron Morton. So after all of that travel, my wife and I actually, when we were house hunting, didn't leave well enough alone. We actually looked at 8 houses in 5 different neighborhoods when we were looking for our permanent house, but ended up in Heron Morton. We're on New Jersey, which the stretch of New Jersey Street that has that green esplanade down the middle, and just love the neighborhood. The fact that everybody who has a dog is out walking their dog in our neighborhood. Everybody who has a baby in their stroller. The restaurants that are on 22nd and on 16th Streets. All of the historic buildings that are there, including the Epilogue Theater, but also some really interesting places on and old Victorian homes that are around, and then some old brick apartment buildings as well that really give off sort of a old South Side Chicago type of feel. That anyway, it's just such an eclectic mix that we just absolutely love and couldn't be happier. So that sort of wraps up my trip around the city. But I would be delighted to stop sharing and to, I wasn't able to see anything that was in the chat window, but love to respond to thoughts, questions that folks might have.
Jeremy, so Lorraine had a question. She said, how can people get engaged in Keep Indianapolis Beautiful if they want to become more involved?
Love that question. So we actually do about 200 different projects throughout the year. So there's something going on all the time. It does get a little bit quieter in the middle of winter, I will admit, but there are opportunities to get engaged in all of the various projects that we're doing, whether that is a neighborhood cleanup. We do some events that are called plogging, which is it's a Swedish term, but it basically is picking up litter and jogging. You don't actually have to jog fast. It could be a slow walk if you want, but we always start and finish near a brewery. So if you pick up a bag of litter and show it off to the owner that you've picked up a bag of litter from his neighborhood or her neighborhood, then they give you a free drink ticket, which is the best kind of payment that you could possibly ask for on something like that. We also often engage with neighborhoods. And so to the extent that a neighborhood association or a neighborhood group wants to request trees, we actually will come with trees. It doesn't cost the neighborhood anything. We will find the best place in that neighborhood to plant them. We will engage folks from the neighborhood and with other volunteers to plant, maintain, mulch, water those trees. But there's something really satisfying. I'm not just saying this as the CEO of the organization, but there's truly something satisfying about looking at a couple of blocks or a city park that doesn't have many trees at the beginning of the day, deploying a bunch of folks out there and looking at the end of the day and seeing it filled with young trees and knowing that they'll live and thrive for a long time. It's really deeply satisfying. And then we actually also ask people to adopt their block. So we've got this Adopt a Block program where if you adopt any block, it could be the block in front of your home, in front of your place where you work, or any place that you'd like to adopt, we'll give you the supplies. So it's nothing out of pocket. We'll give you the trash bags, the gloves, the litter grabbers, and then you just volunteer to keep that stretch of street clean. So there are lots of different ways to get engaged and involved with KIB, and would love all of it. Thank you.
So this is the 11th program that we've done in our Historic Neighborhoods series. And you're right. So the majority of them have focused on buildings. And I find this really, really interesting that you're focusing, primarily on the trees and things in the neighborhood. And one of the questions that I ask everybody is, do you have a favorite building or a favorite story? So do you have a favorite tree? My kids and I, we drive around, we watch for really cool trees. We love to look for trees that would be perfect treehouse trees. So is there a tree in Indianapolis or in any neighborhood that you just think it's the greatest tree in Indianapolis?
The greatest tree in Indianapolis. Well, we actually did a tree survey. We actually asked people to come up with the top 10 list. I will say that there is a Chinkapin oak, which is by Pogue's Run, that is named, and the name of it, of course, is escaping me as I'm sitting here on this webinar and talking with you all. But that one is an enormous oak tree, which I like the really massive trees that have been there forever. There is a tree that is near me that is, I think, around it's like just east of Central. And it is also a massive oak tree. It must be close to 200 or 250 years old, and just enormous. And so it's those that I love. And then I have like a probably about 150-year-old red maple in front of my house. I found out that its age is probably 150 to 155 years old. I also found out that red maples in Indiana live to be about 150 to 200 years old. So I'm on the downward trend. Every day I go out, I just give it a little pat. How you doing? But I love that tree too. Okay.
So here is a question. What role does beautification play in attracting or retaining people in a neighborhood?
It's such a good question. And it's one of the things that I'm actually, there's some new research out there that is really exciting. We are partnering with a professor at the University of Michigan right now who's been doing some studies that have shown that if you have a vacant lot and you do something intentional to it by planting trees or by creating some native plants or picking up the litter, it reduces all forms of violent crime by a statistically significant amount. And so we are going to work with him to look at the 65 green spaces that we've created to determine what the police data was 2 years before and 2 years after, and see what difference that makes, such that it may actually inform where we create new green spaces. We may be putting them in places where we think it can have the biggest difference in reducing violent crime. We are planting 10,000 trees for Citizens Energy Group in neighborhoods that were prone to flooding. Mm-hmm. So once those trees are mature through their leaves and their roots, they will take up a sufficient amount of water that it will considerably reduce flooding. I know people think about leaves in the fall and backed up storm drains, and that is true, but over the course of the year, having trees makes those things better. And there also is a strong correlation between having more trees and more nature and higher property values. So all those things are come into play and make neighborhoods nicer places to be.
Yeah. I think I had seen something about that study. I didn't realize it was violent crime. I guess I thought it was just crime in general. So I think it's really interesting. Lorraine wanted to know, has anything surprised you about Indianapolis that you weren't expecting?
Yeah.
Besides the t-shirts in Speedway.
That's right. Those were a little bit of a surprise. So, I think my answer to this is actually something that I've commented on a few times. And the interesting thing is that the civic organizations in Indianapolis, the civic leadership organizations, get together regularly and talk about how we can collaborate to make the city a better place. And that does not happen in other places. So I will routinely sit down with the Arts Council and the Humanities Center, Visit Indy, the Airport Authority, Sports Corps, and downtown Indy, and the list goes on. And we're sitting, okay, you're doing that? Well, great. We were thinking about doing this, and this is how 1 and 1 could make 3. And I was talking to a friend of mine who moved here from the San Francisco area, and he said, if I was still in San Francisco and there was a big meeting of city leaders and change makers, if I was lucky, maybe I'd get invited to the meeting, but I'd have to sit on a chair against the wall and not be able to participate. And here, I find myself sitting at a table with the CEO of Eli Lilly on one side and the mayor on the other, and they're saying, "What do you think, Mark?" And and then my opinion gets reflected and acted upon. And I think that the opportunity, if you want to make a difference, to be part of that is something that is really lovely and surprising.
Yeah. Ruth Ingram said, "This is wonderful, unlike anything I've experienced before, and I've lived in Indianapolis since 1945. So, and she wanted to know, would you provide bus tours to show us what Keep Indianapolis Beautiful does in different neighborhoods, like a great garden club program, and a way to promote Keep Indianapolis Beautiful?"
Yeah, we've actually done a few of these tours. We can get to maybe 3 or 4 green spaces in an afternoon before exhaustion really sets in, because they're not, I mean, we wouldn't just go to some that were like right near each other. We want to get a flavor of some of those different neighborhoods as well. So we have done that. I would love to organize something like that if that's of interest to this group, and we could find a time to do that perhaps in the spring.
Oh yeah, we'd love to do that. We can set something up. Lorraine Bavel wanted to point out that she has a Keep Indianapolis Beautiful tree in her front yard in Meridian Park. So let's see. Marjorie said, "I've noticed that some old tree canopies have been replaced by ornamental trees. It seems to change the character of the street. What are your thoughts about that trend?"
Yeah, like Bradford pears and those
Oh,
types of things. No. Yeah, Eric, that was the right response. Yeah, we are very careful at KIB to only plant species that are native to Indiana. One of the interesting things, though, is that we are starting to think about how climate change is affecting which tree species will thrive over the coming decades. And so it is becoming less appropriate for us to plant trees that are hardy at the northern part of the state. And we really need to start thinking about trees that are thriving in the southern part of the state as we're thinking about what species to plant. So that's one part of this, but you know, I'm not a big, certainly I always despair when big healthy trees come down. There are rules in place that if enough big trees come down, they have to be mitigated. But of course, you know, even if you plant 10 young trees, it's never going to replace one, you know, old grandfather tree, right? So so it takes a while for that balance to come back. But I always, if we can save a tree, love to save the tree.
Okay. Marjorie says there's new information out recently about the value of green canopy and the difference between high income versus low income neighborhoods. It sounds as though you're taking this factor into consideration where you're planting trees. Yeah,
we actually have a variety of different data sets, including LiDAR, which is low-flying airplanes that take aerial pictures. And so we have a pretty good understanding of which neighborhoods have a really robust tree canopy and which do not. There are census tracts in Indy that have over 2/3 of the census tract covered with tree canopy. There are census tracts that have less than 10%. The average in the city is about 33, 35, somewhere in there. So, you know, if you're in Geist or Eagle Creek, it might be on the upper end of that scale. If you're in Hawville, over by IUPUI, it's on the lower end of that scale. We also have found that, of course, potentially not surprising, neighborhoods that were historically redlined were also underinvested in terms of green infrastructure. And so we are being very intentional with the goal of trying to make the city more environmentally equitable. So we are finding the neighborhoods that have fewer trees and a more sparse canopy and intentionally going there first and foremost. I mean, we serve the entire city, but we are really trying to focus our resources, our time, talent, and treasure in the places that need it the most. Are you aware if there will be funding available through the new infrastructure plan for these types of programs? And I'm thinking specifically, President Biden, when he was talking about it, mentioned the Claiborne neighborhood in New Orleans, and we know that there was, you know, these giant oak trees that were lost when the highway went through there. And so he's really interested in some of this money going to make cities more equitable. Do you think that there would be funding available? Is that something you're looking into? Well, I'm hopeful. I don't know the details of all of the conversations, and even though I was born and raised in DC, and my late father worked in the White House, and so I live and breathe this stuff. I have not been following the daily blow by blow, but I do hope that there will be some funding available. And funding comes sometimes from strange places. So you know, there was CARES Act funding during the pandemic to hire people that had lost their jobs because of you know, either the restaurant where they worked had closed or for other reasons. And we were actually shorthanded, incredibly shorthanded last year because nobody wanted to be together, right? Even outdoors. So we needed to get a certain number of trees into the ground, for example. And so we were able to get out of work restaurant workers and others and pay them a living wage to come work for us for a brief period of time. But that was sort of a strange, you know, nothing that we predicted, but it was a strange source of federal funding that trickled down to us. I am hopeful that some of these things will be clearly will come to us, and we will be I think, if any organization is going to work on green infrastructure in Indy, it's us.
Okay. Let's see here. Looks like another question here from Marjorie. We've had trees in our street planting strip from KIB for years. Sadly, it has been an ongoing process due to the number of trees taken out by drunk drivers going too fast on New York Street. You just point that out. But Ruth Ingram asks or says, it was sad to see a large bur oak cut down at Broad Ripple Park to make way for a new building. I'm surprised that could happen. And what is your understanding of that?
Yeah, I mean, we can't get into any of the specific decisions that are made by builders and by zoning approvals and so forth. We do get called in when there needs to be mitigation. So, for example, on the 16 Tech campus, there were a number of big trees that came down there as a result of some of the new buildings that they're putting in, and so we are working with them, and a big part of what we're doing is actually not the tree planting itself, it's the community engagement and the community outreach to understand and to not to say, here's what we're doing to replace 10 little ones for the one big one you lost, but it is a conversation about what is it that you really want, need, and desire, and setting the table together on how we can create what the future will look like from a green perspective. So again, we as I said earlier, we hate to see big trees come down. Sometimes it comes down. There's it's not a role that we can play easily to stand between the bulldozer and the
Right.
particular tree that's going to come down.
Yeah. So on our property, when the home was built, and Rose may know, Rose Wernicke is on here. I think she may know a little bit more because she's the historian for us. Apparently, when the home was built, the gentleman, and this was in the late 1800s, was I don't know, an arborist enthusiast, I guess. But he had trees from, and I can't even remember if it was around the world or around the United States, planted in our yard, in our side yard. I can understand why many of those didn't quite make it, but I would love to see more trees there. More trees there now. Jeremy, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we jump off of here?
It's really been a pleasure. I think it would be lovely if folks wanted to get engaged with KIB. Some of the tasks that we need to get done are pretty physically demanding, so not for everybody. It's also sometimes hard to get my 13-year-old up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to come plant trees with his dad. Sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I'm not. Harder still for my college-age daughter to get up out of bed at 9 o'clock on a Saturday. But I do think that I want to end actually with a quick story that I'm happy to share. But it was I was talking with Bob Osley on the city council, and he was mentioning how he went to church with his 96-year-old mother, and the pastor was complaining that there was litter outside the church and that the city was not doing its job. And he said he held his tongue, and he drove his mom home after and said, "Mom, what would you have done in your day?" And she said, "What do you mean? We would have just gone across the street and picked it up." And he said, "Right." So he said, "I dropped my mom off at home. I drove back to church. I went to the pastor and I said, 'You are my spiritual leader, but human to human, you're wrong. Yes, it is the city's responsibility, and it's our responsibility. And so if we want the area around our church to look nice, guess what? You have to tell us that it's our responsibility to do it.'" And I said, "I agree with you 100%. And so I just want to feel like, I hope that I can encourage everybody to do their little bit. We can all play a part in making India a better place to live and play.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeremy. We
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Jeremy,
Thank you.
I would like to make I'm jumping on to make one comment that I think, only because I think it's so important. Holy Cross neighborhood that we had presented earlier, Kelly Winzig was their president for 6 years, and she led that neighborhood to do just that. They would always go down, particularly along the interstate on Pine Street, and pick up all the trash on both sides. They come over to Lockerbie too, pick up the trash. And she was very proud of how well they were taking care of the litter and getting rid of it and carrying on the traditions of KIB. I jumped in to share that because Kelly Winzig, only barely 50, passed away about 2 months ago. And for those of us who knew her well and recognized her as a leader of the historic neighborhoods, a toast to her. Hear, hear,
Yeah.
Kelly. We love you and we miss you.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thank you. And again, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much. I have a couple of our upcoming programs I'd like to mention, and we certainly would like to invite you to our open house. If you've not been to the Propoleum, you need to come to the Propoleum. So on December 8th, from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m., we're going to have an open house, our holiday open house at the Prop. It looks lovely for the holidays. There will be, wine and hors d'oeuvres and friendly conversation, and you're welcome to tour the home from the 1st to the 3rd floor, and the carriage house as well. Ours isn't really small, ours is really big. So, and then as we close out the year, coming up on December 15th at noon, we have our holiday tea at the Propoleum. We're going to kick off the new year in February on the 17th with the second in our Women's Enrichment Series program, and that will feature Sunny Lou Williams, who's the president of TechServe, and that will be back in person. We're going to come in, barring Omicron, we're going to be back in person at the Prop in February for that program. We'll have a VIP reception beforehand, and the program will begin at 6 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I have to thank Marjorie and Lorraine for chairing this committee. It has been a great year. We have all seen parts of Indianapolis that we had no idea, I think, even existed. I've been here forever, it feels like, and I've learned something in every single program that you've put together. So thank you so much, Lorraine, and thank you, Marjorie, for doing this for us. And to everybody else, happiest of holidays to everybody, and we hope you have a safe, healthy, and happy new year. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Jeremy.
Jeremy, do your kids row? You said you rowed. Do your kids do it too? Do they?
No, I can't get any of them in the boat. No.
My 12-year-old just took it up. He just started and he loves it out at Eagle Creek. So yeah.
Yeah. I know. Buddy and I started our crew team in high school. So yeah, and that program is still going strong, remarkably.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Yep. No, so he just took it. I don't know anything about it, so I'm learning.
Yeah, I rode competitively in college and was almost but not quite good enough to make the national team.
U.S. Rowing is located in Indianapolis.
Used to be.
Oh,
yeah.
they're gone? Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't
because
know
they
that.
realized that there was no water. So they're in Princeton, New Jersey now.
Oh.
We do hold the Big Ten tournament, the Big Ten rowing championships or something to that effect here on Eagle Creek. So
Yeah.
a little bit of water, but not too much.
Well, Jeremy, I worked way back when, and I can't remember if I told you this, for Clean City Committee when I was in grad school. So I just, great. We've come a long way, baby. Something I asked long ago was, do you think recycling will ever become mandatory in Indianapolis?